Your Excellencies, the former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, our own Baba, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo. Your Excellency, the former Head of State and the Chairman of today, General Abdulsalami Abubakar. Your Excellency, the former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. Your Excellencies, former governors, former deputy governors, our Babas in Afenifere, my father's colleagues, the vibrant members of the media, most esteemed and honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to welcome you all to this symposium to mark the 10th anniversary of what our chairman, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, described then as the glorious and final exit of my father, Senator Abraham Adesanya. His Excellency had worked with my father since becoming the military head of state 10 years earlier in 1998, before the demise of my father in 2008. And their combined efforts helped to smooth the transition to democracy. So it is fitting that a further 10 years on, His Excellency is here to consider the legacy of that struggle. I would also like to welcome our other esteemed speakers, High Chief Nwodo, General Zamani Lekwot, Professor Senator Banji Akintoye, and Dr. Mrs. Doyinsola Abiola. And our special guest, our guest speaker, the Chief Speaker, Chief Emeka Anyako, the former Secretary General of Commonwealth, who has a deep understanding of the demands of statesmanship, having been the Secretary General of the Commonwealth for 10 years. Our topic is leadership and the future of Nigeria, a topic my father himself would have been supremely qualified to discuss. But in his absence, we have the privilege of being able to draw on his memory. Indeed, I've been touched by the many moving tributes we have received on the occasion of this anniversary, reminding us that my father was an embodiment of ethical, principled leadership, an example for others to follow. He and others like him struggled for democracy in Nigeria at a time when the prospect seemed very bleak. And it is thanks to their efforts that today we have at least a stable and functioning democracy. Of course, things are far from perfect, as we have a long way to go to bring about a polity worthy to be called the legacy of Abraham Adesanya. But today's leaders can certainly take inspiration from the example set by my father. I would like to talk about a few of the qualities that made my father who he was, and that today's leaders would do well to emulate. First and foremost, my father was a highly principled person. He never compromised his beliefs, either out of fear or favor. His principles were like the North Star to an ancient navigator, the means by which he oriented himself to eternal truth that sits high above the fray of human compromise and treachery. So he would not be shaken from those principles by threat or by bribes. As we all remember all too well, in 1997, he almost paid the ultimate price when, by the grace of God, he narrowly survived an assassination attempt. He was not only unscathed, but unbowed, and refused to be silenced by the threat of the assassin's bullet. The next day, he was ready for work as usual. And by coincidence, we have one of the co-speakers here today who was threatened just last week by explosive thrown in his house, and just like my father is here today. No wonder he earned the reputation of being indestructible and was nicknamed Akpamaku of Nigeria. For his part, he responded in typical fashion, fully aware that next time he might not be so lucky. He said, I quote, "If I die, let them simply write, Adesanya, a man of principle. No more, no less. That was my father." But while he was principled, my father was never rigid in his opinions. He was always prepared to listen to others and even acknowledge superior argument if he was persuaded by them. That is a rare quality in a politician. They don't listen. And another one that today's leader will do well to emulate. My father used to say, rank does not confer privilege or give power. It imposes responsibility. And part of that responsibility is to consider the view of others and to represent them. And that brings me to another important quality of my late father. He valued humanity and therefore appreciated everyone he came across for their intrinsic worth in the eyes of God. There is no low, there is no high, you are a human being. He was sometimes described as a primordial progressive, a progressive long before it became fashionable for politicians to label themselves as such. That was because his love of humanity was instinctive, not affected. He hated injustice and was passionate about social justice and worked tirelessly in defense of the common man and indeed the common woman, because he was supported all through his life and career by my mother. And of course, for a political leader, that life was remarkably modest. You know the usual thing, once you're a politician and you have plenty of money, plenty of women, plenty of wives. Another virtue other politicians would do well to learn was my father's selflessness and lack of interest in material riches. He lived a simple and contented life and never believed in amassing wealth, which for too many of our so-called leaders seem to be the whole point of political career. You are in politics because you want to go and make money. My father never asked for anything for himself, even though as a key player in the transition to democracy, he could easily have used his influence to demand for money or even oil well, particularly from General Abdul Salam Abubakar. He never did, and indeed he was suspicious of those who seemed to have unexplained wealth or who appear to have entered politics for reasons other than public service. In fact, my father did have a fault. If my father did indeed had a fault, it was probably this, that he did not suffer full gladly. He was fiercely intelligent man and he used his wits to help others. He received his legal training in England and immediately returned to Nigeria to defend his political leader, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, in a treasonable felony case, a case that earned him the nickname Jingle Foot after a renowned British lawyer. Then, of course, he established his own legal practice, defending the common man, often on a pro bono basis, living a life of selfless service to his fellow countrymen. He never understood why others were less diligent or why they made excuses for failing to meet the rigors and demand of the movement for democracy. Even arriving late for meetings, he would not tolerate it because my father was always on time. As he used to say, service to man is service to God. So he took his responsibilities extremely seriously. Finally, I want to commend my late father as a patriot and someone who never saw any contradiction between being proudly Yoruba and proudly Nigerian. He fought for true federalism and devolution of powers, as well as individual and ethnic nationality rights. And of course, he was an invaluable repository of Yoruba proverbs, idioms, and wise sayings for every occasion, which to those of us who are close to him were privileged to learn from. I'm proud to have been able to imbibe my father's values from an early age, because those values have helped me in every sphere of my endeavor. And I've also been lucky enough to be able to pass them on to my children and my nephews, my nieces. I'm grateful to God for such a rare privilege, one that money can never buy. But my father's legacy belonged no less to the nation as a whole, if we are only wise enough to learn from it. One of my father's favorite quotations was from Edmund Burke, who said, I quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." So we must ask ourselves, what role would my father have sought to play today? What evil might he prevent by the intervention of a man of integrity and principle? And what can we do that we are not yet doing? As we consider the questions of leadership and future of Nigeria, let me urge all those who would lead our country to ask those questions and to emulate selfless and commitment to public service of the man we are here to remember today. So I want to appreciate those who, together with myself and my brother, the members of the committee, I want to appreciate them, and I would want to please ask them to come up here before we start fully, so for them to be recognized. And then I also want to seriously appreciate my husband, because without him, I don't think I will have the energy to stand here. He's the pillar, he's the strength, he's everything. And then, specifically, I want to appreciate my two non-biological sisters. One is in England. I call her the commander-in-chief of the people. She's in England working tirelessly, and our other sister is here